everybody? Hey now, hey now, hey now, hey now. What's up, everybody? Welcome to a brand new edition of Over the Line Hot Takes. So glad you are here today. And one of the biggest stories over the past couple of days has been the Senate dress code, where you would probably say to yourself, a place like the Senate, Congress, this is a place where it is very revered. People really look at it as kind of a sacred place. You go back to January 6th and the fact that the people that got arrested in the wake of January 6th, they got arrested because they walked through and disgraced such a sacred place like the Senate chambers. You can't do that. This place is only for the utmost professionalism. Only the most important people come through those doors. Important people like John Fetterman. After Chuck Schumer has relaxed the dress code for senators, not the staffers, not you peasants, not the measly peasants, but for the senators. We're going to relax the dress code because one bum who stole an election out of Pennsylvania, he didn't do it. He don't know what's going on. Can't seem to wear a suit. So in order to accommodate him, accommodate the minority, that's the thing for the left. You take the smallest group of people and you make everybody else adhere to what that very small group wants or desires. John Fetterman took on his first day in the Senate, dressing exactly how he wants to dress. He ended up showing up in the Senate looking like a child molester, as you see here. Seriously, I'm being serious. If this guy walked up to your kid in a park, and said, "Hey, little boy, hey, little girl, how are you doing? You want some free candy?" You would snatch your kid up so fast and be like, "Get away from that man. That's obviously a pedophile." Which helps him fit into the Democrat Party, obviously. It's the party of pedos, which is kind of catchy phrase. You could probably go with that. The party of the pedos, the Democrat Party. They should go with that. Here's John Fetterman walking in on his first day on the job as a free man, free from the bondage of fashion. Got that white trash tattoo right there on his forearm. Oh, yeah. Yeah, you would not let your kid be around that guy. You know it. I know it. Come on. You would not let John Fetterman be alone in a room with your kid. And ironically, out of all days, John Fetterman presided over the Senate today. He got to sit in the big boy chair, up top. He got to tell people, how to do their job and conduct business. Check this out. There he is. He's up there in the big boy chair. That's right, looking very important. There's a very important pedophile in the Senate chamber at this point. He's just sitting there with his arms crossed because he has no idea what's going on. And the rest of these people that are wearing business suits, that are wearing, business dresses or whatever the women are wearing, they got to be thinking, what a joke this is. Look at him just sitting there. He has no idea what to do. Oh, my God. Can you believe it's come to this? This is, and so many people on the left are like, well, it's not that big a deal. I don't care what they dress like. There is decorum. And when Democrats are in charge, decorum goes out the window. They think, well, this is going to connect with the younger voters. They think we're hip. No, they think John Fetterman's a pedophile. Yeah, even the young people. I was thinking about it this morning, and in reality, I think our younger generation that's coming up, and that includes my child's age and younger, I think it's clicking with them that these people are not cool. Like, they're able to see, when it comes to the far left wacko activists, they can see, they're growing up to see that it's not working out. And hopefully that means we have a generation on the horizon that will be a little smarter with not just their vote, but just their general point of view. Hopefully I'm just not, looking at this through tunnel vision with only my child, but I don't know. I got a good feeling about it. Hey, Vapor Forge bringing you this part of the show. Where's my Vapor Forge sign at? There it is. Let me get that. Hey now, Vapor Forge. That's right. Right on 280, 4673 Highway 280 East, 205-874-9010. Y'all go see my boys at Vapor Forge. And I tell you what, if you hear about Vapor Forge right here on Over the Line, when you go to Vapor Forge, tell them that. Tell them, differentiate between the radio show and the podcast. Mention you listen on the podcast, and that'll help us know how many of y'all listen to us and pay attention and follow directions. But thank you to Vapor Forge, Tony, Amy, the rest of the crew down there for sponsoring this podcast. Now, Tuesday's episode, which was called The Truth About J6, I brought you an episode, the first episode of Lara Logan's new series. And it was about a young man named Matthew Perna who had got caught in the mix of people going into the Capitol. Didn't do anything crazy. Just went with the crowd. And it ruined his life. The weight of the Justice Department was so heavy, it literally crushed this guy. A guy who had a family, a guy who had a fiancée, had his own business, was crushed under the weight of Merrick Garland's DOJ. And it was a heartbreaking story. Here's a little recap of what I showed you guys last time.
His aunt said, suspect number 73 stood out in his red Trump sweatshirt as cameras recorded him inside the Capitol. Roughly 14 minutes that cost him his business, his reputation, and the woman he planned to marry. It also shattered the sanctity of home, where he was shunned and shamed by people he knew and others he'd never met. Jerry said he felt like the walls of Sharpsville, this small town of iron and steel that over the past century had forged 4 generations of their family in western Pennsylvania, were closing in. Then came the call that changed everything.
I just stepped my foot in the tub, and my phone rang, and it was one of my brothers. And said, Jerry, you need to get a plane ticket and come home. Matt just hanged himself in his garage.
And you see how utterly devastating that was. If you have not watched it, I encourage you to go back and watch that episode. But I feel like that was, or this as a whole, is a very important series. As they come out every Thursday, and there's a brand new one out. It's talking, again, about Matt Perna, but it really puts in perspective one of the topics that I'm so adamant about, which is January 6th. Puts it in perspective. It's so important to me, January 6th is, because of what the government has been able to do since then. It has given them immense power, more consolidated power than one event has ever given our government, including 9/11. 9/11 gave our government a tremendous amount of power, but not the type of power this gave them. Think about January 6th, and then 2 weeks later, on January 20th, when Joe Biden is sworn into office, think about what's happened after that. And how many times in this consolidation of power has January 6th been referenced? They've used it to take away so many of your freedoms. So with Lara Logan's new series regarding January the 6th, I want to keep bringing these to you as long as they're available. This is part 2 of Matthew Perna's story related to J6.
Summer was just settling into the Shenango Valley where the forest reaches from western Pennsylvania into Ohio, when we met up with Marcus Priester. He and Matthew Perna would come here to run the rocky dirt trails, but also to listen and be still. It was a little more than a year since his best friend had killed himself, and this time he was taking Matthew's friends and family on a pilgrimage of sorts to a clearing deep in the forest where Marcus and Matthew's Uncle Ron had scattered some of his ashes and planted a tree in his memory.
Wow. This was Matt's church, huh?
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Serenity. It's where he came to unplug from the hectic lives we live.
For Matthew's strongest advocate, his aunt, Jerry Perna, this journey had been a long time coming.
You know, it's strange. I feel like Matt is walking this with us.
Do you?
Yeah.
We tackled 4 miles of winding paths until we came to a place where the river runs quietly and the trees were not so thick.
This is the spot he chose?
This is it. This is where he requested to be placed. Needs some water. It'll take a minute. It's a little dry, but it's doing okay.
Yeah, it is.
And this is his water bottle.
Wow. Did he carry that
Give it a
everywhere?
drink. He did. And all these stickers on it,
Yeah.
they're from all of his travels.
Wow.
He would always just put another layer on. There's about 3 layers of stickers on there.
Really?
Yep.
The moment for Jerry, more bitter than sweet, recalling the pain, she said, drove her nephew to an early grave.
People literally hated you that didn't even know you. They hated you. I could post something on Twitter with Matt's picture, and I can almost always count on somebody to come on and tell me that he deserved it, or he was a coward, he took the coward's way out. And it sickens me to my core because he's dead. How much more could these people want from him? He's dead. Spitting on his grave brings you joy. I don't understand that mentality in people. I don't understand how anybody could have that much hatred in their heart that they would say things so horrible about somebody who's dead, knowing that their family member is grieving. Have they never lost anybody that was close to them? Have they never had that feeling that I feel and that my family feels and that Matt's friends feel? If you've never had that, then I feel sorry for you because you've never known love. You've never known love if you don't feel what we're feeling about somebody we loved so much.
And Matt, I mean, he had his family, he had his friends, and he had help.
But he needed somebody to tell him what was going to happen. He needed somebody to lay it out for him. And nobody could tell him. Nobody. There wasn't one person. That's why he searched his Bible. He searched his Bible so often. His Bible is just filled with notes, and oftentimes there's sentences with a question mark on the end, asking God, why is this happening?
Sin, guilt, shame.
Remorse, depression.
Numb the pain, bitterness, anger. He just couldn't find the answer in this book. And after he died and we went into his home, and this was sitting on his coffee table, and I could tell that this book had been thrown many times.
All of his notes.
And they painted him out to be this person that he wasn't. And there were
Devastating.
conversations that he was starting to believe it.
He did. He
was
started to believe
Matt,
it.
what's wrong with you, man?
In our last conversation, he said to me, they keep telling me I'm guilty, Aunt Jerry. I must be guilty. I must be guilty. I'm getting what I deserve. And I was like, what are you talking about?
The aftermath of January 6 had swept through Matthew Perna's life like a hurricane, his face all over local news, as the protest that was turned into an insurrection became a death sentence. Out of more than 1,100 arrested, less than 2% were charged with conspiring to overthrow the government. But you'd never have known from watching the news or listening to leaders on both sides of the aisle.
January 6th was the very definition of an insurrection.
It was a violent insurrection.
These were rioters and insurrectionists.
Trump incited insurrections.
The Nation Watch is insurrectionists.
Attacked by insurrectionists.
It's not protest, it's insurrection.
To mark the first anniversary of January 6, about 7 weeks before Matthew killed himself, the most powerful Justice Department official in the nation promised more arrests.
The actions we have taken thus far will not be our last.
Matthew Perna's fate lay in the hands of those sending political protesters to prison for non-violent offenses. Something they did not do to those protesting Brett Kavanaugh's nomination to the Supreme Court in September 2018, where hundreds had the charges dropped or were ordered to pay fines around $50 under a Washington, D.C. law known as post and forfeit. Nor did it happen to those in Portland, Oregon during the summer of 2020, who night after night tried to burn down the federal courthouse with federal agents inside. Those responsible got to skip jail with no criminal record in exchange for community service and staying out of trouble for a time. Yet for January 6th, the FBI turned SWAT teams and battering rams on American citizens, often for misdemeanor crimes.
Don't touch me.
This is a crime.
Keep your fucking hands off me. Don't touch me.
Step back over there.
And Matthew Perna felt the working-class streets of home had turned on him and his family.
His father had received hate mail, threats. This is some of the most awful things you could say about a person.
And that bothered Matthew?
It sure did. And he got to the point where he didn't feel comfortable showing his face in town. Him and I would have to drive out of town to a place where he felt more comfortable because he didn't want to show his face in the community.
That sentiment echoed in a letter his father, Larry Perna, wrote to John Bates, the judge in Matthew's case, where he said, "We were no longer comfortable going out in public, something I never in my life thought I would experience in the town where our family was respected and well known." Marcus and others close to Matthew laid much of the blame with the Sharon Herald, a local paper whose narrative they felt was one-sided, falsely cast Matthew as a threat, and after he hanged himself, altered his obituary as confirmed by the funeral home, removing 2 lines they didn't want to print. One said he was ushered in by police. The other, many people are responsible for the pain he endured. We reached out repeatedly to the Sharon Herald for comment, but no one would talk to us. As Matthew Perna's case dragged on, his family said they felt him slipping away.
He didn't want to go out with his friends. Sometimes he answered his phone, sometimes he didn't. He became a recluse, in a sense.
And if he didn't answer his phone, what would you do?
We panicked. And we kept calling.
Matthew warned his friends in text messages that were hard to read. And in his Bible, among his many notes, next to Psalm 13, he asked, "How much longer?" Some friends went to his attorney, others to police, who went to his house 3 times to check on him. The prosecutor in his case, Nihar Mohanty, requested a mental health evaluation to help his supervisors know more about Mr. Perna's mental health status. In the evaluation sent to the DOJ in July, the psychologist stated Matthew was at moderate risk of harming himself, was not aggressive, had no intent to engage in criminal behavior when he entered the Capitol, and presented no significant risk for current or future offending. That did not appear to move the DOJ, who still wanted to send Matthew Perna away for years, and refused a misdemeanor plea deal. Time and again, the prosecutor in D.C. indicated his office was calling the shots, not him. In desperation, Aunt Jerry said, after almost a year, Matthew collapsed under the weight of the Justice Department and pled guilty to 3 misdemeanors and the felony charge of obstructing an official proceeding, even though the Senate chamber was empty when Matthew walked through the Capitol building. With no criminal history and no violent crimes, Matthew Perna pinned his hopes on a sentence of months, not years, and prepared for prison. That Christmas, when he came to stay with her, Aunt Jerry said he was not the same.
And there was a picture of him and my son and I on that Christmas, that last Christmas. And every time I look at that picture and I compare it to every picture of Matt that I have prior to that, there was a sparkle in Matt's eye before. And that picture on Christmas, the day after Christmas, that picture was taken, that sparkle is gone. And it's then that I realized his spirit was dead at that point. And nothing was going to get it back.
When the news came that the DOJ at the last minute was seeking a harsher sentence that could add 5 to 7 years of jail time, Aunt Jerry said Matthew was crushed. He told Marcus and Jerry it was a terrorism enhancement. According to the DOJ, it wasn't. There's no official record because Matthew died before the paperwork was filed. But his family said they were told it was based on a threat to cause physical injury from a comment Matthew made in this Facebook Live video on the evening of January 6.
Before we wrap this up, I just want to clarify all the people that are really concerned, thinking that this is over now, that Trump's lost.
It's not over.
It's not over. Trust me. The purpose of today was to expose Pence as a traitor. Period.
Yeah, they used a couple of sentences from that video that they took completely out of context. They took Mike Pence as a traitor. It isn't over yet.
As if it was a threat.
And that is the terroristic threat that they were trying to use.
And you had a conversation with the prosecutor. Can you tell us about that?
Yes. There was an operator on the line, and she said, I'm going to have the attorney on the phone with you. I want you to know that you are on a recorded line with several witnesses listening in. I was like, okay. So he gets on the phone, tell him who I was. I said, I am Matthew Perna's aunt. He says, let me start off by saying that there are many people in my department that felt very bad that Matthew decided to take his life. I said, really? I said, there are many people in your department, including you, who are the reason Matthew took his life. He hanged himself because of the people in your department. I said, what exactly about Matt's case warranted a terrorism enhancement? Exactly what did he do? He said, if he just could have waited, I don't think the terrorism enhancement would have stuck with his judge. That infuriated me. And I said, do you not understand? It was the threat of that enhancement that caused my nephew to hang himself. I said, do you not understand these are human beings that you're playing with? You throw out an idle threat that could have taken his sentence from 6 to 12 months to 5 to 6 years. And he hangs himself because of that fear that you instilled. And now you're saying you don't think it would have stuck? He said, again, I am very sorry for that your nephew took his life. And I said, I hope that every night before you go to bed, the last thing you think of is the name Matthew Perna and the role you played in his death.
We tried to speak with Nihar Mohanty, but he was unable to comment, and his office disputed Jerry Perna's memory of that call.
There's an old adage, democracy ensures people are governed no better than they deserve. If you don't protest, you don't demand that your elected officials do something about injustice, you're going to be governed with injustice, and you're going to be the victim.
Louis Gohmert was one of the few in Congress, Jerry Perna said, who always made time for her and seemed to care about Matthew.
What was it about his case that struck you?
To see somebody that was the victim of our own Department of Justice. It's just, and especially somebody as peaceable and caring as Matthew obviously was. Shame on anybody that doesn't care how the system abused this poor guy. It's just too tragic. We shouldn't have a repeat of that.
Gohmert was on the floor of Congress on January 6, objecting to the certification of results in contested states, his fourth Electoral College vote count in 18 years on the Hill.
It wasn't until January 6, 2021, Republicans objected, and the Democrats are all saying that's a crime for you to object, it's treasonous, seditious, and going, what? We're doing exactly what you did.
And you witnessed that firsthand.
Yeah, and I'm going, this is crazy. You guys did this. So were you being treasonous in 2017, 2005, 2001? It didn't make sense.
Did you have the sense that some of your Republican colleagues were in lockstep with the Democrats on this? I mean, Mitch McConnell and others.
There were Republicans that got mad because we were objecting, yes.
So your own party?
Some
in your own party were not happy with you?
The majority of the Republicans were concerned.
Are you a dying breed, Louis, in the GOP?
I would like to think there are more people in Congress now that will say what they believe than even if it costs them a committee or a chairmanship.
What have we gone from 1% to 2%?
Well, I think there are more now.
When we caught up with Gohmert in the Lone Star State, retirement seemed to have set him free, so we asked a few tough questions about January 6.
Do you believe this was a setup, this was an intel operation?
These people came to Washington to protest, but the masses had no intention to be involved in any violence at all.
So you're dodging the question.
No, I do think that a lot of what happened was stirred up by the federal government. All those people that showed up, they showed up of their own accord, but there were people involved that manipulated them.
They were framed.
They were framed.
Thank you. Thank you. No medal. No medal. No medal. Thank you, sir. Love you. We love you.
Gohmert served on the Hill for so long, many had forgotten he had served on the bench before that, 10 years as a federal judge in Texas. In his view, Matthew Perna should never have gone to court, let alone prison. From the sit-ins of the civil rights era and the Vietnam War, Americans have a long tradition of breaking laws in the name of civil disobedience. And few cities have seen as much resistance as the nation's capital, where Democrats obstructed an official session of Congress for 26 hours on the 22nd of June, 2016.
We will occupy this floor.
Gohmert, who was there, said no one went to prison. What stood out to us in Washington, D.C., was the ease and enthusiasm with which many Republicans tossed their own under the January 6th bus. Gohmert and Marjorie Taylor Greene fought mostly alone to see January 6 prisoners inside the D.C. jail, renamed the Gulag by those inside, whose cries for help were mostly ignored, including veterans and retired law enforcement, some held without trial for 2 years or more. Gohmert said what they found there was a shock.
People needed medical help, and they weren't getting it. One guy had cancer, wasn't getting the treatment. It was just outrageous.
Were any of the prisoners beaten or abused?
Some have been, yes.
Is that normal?
No.
Is it even legal?
No. People don't listen to those that have been jailed.
He lost income. He lost his friendships. He lost his standing in his community. But we stood by Matt as his family because we knew him.
From the stormy streets of D.C. to Mar-a-Lago, where she met with President Trump, to the Hill, where she testified at a field hearing held by Congressman Matt Gaetz. Jerry Perna has made justice for Matthew her full-time job.
I ask you to bring this bill to the table and encourage your constituents to pass it. Please, I ask you, do not let my nephew's death be in vain.
The Matthew Lawrence Perna Act of 2022, written by Louis Gohmert's team to protect nonviolent political protesters on all sides, would end pretrial detention for defendants like Matthew, not charged with violent crimes. But the bill may never become law. So far, Marjorie Taylor Greene, the only member of Congress to co-sign.
The People's House. They call it the People's House. Which people? Not you and me.
Actually, the Founding Fathers did mean you and me.
But it's not what it means now.
No.
That's not what it means.
When we joined Matthew's family in the forest, the pain of his death had not faded. Not for his Uncle Ron, nor for his Aunt Monnie, his mother's identical twin. Matthew had slept at her house nearly every night between his arrest and suicide.
To me, it was just driven. It was just driven to this. And I can't accept this.
Do you think you'll ever accept it?
I believe that God is good, and maybe he said, it's time, Matt. Quit suffering now, come up. You know? I don't know, because I always thought suicide was wrong.
It's hard to see someone you love suffer like that, to that point.
Yeah. I think what really upsets me is I really believe this country was good. And the more and more I see, I don't know that it is.
Do you feel betrayed?
Yeah, I do. And that's why I love Trump. Because finally you have somebody who's willing to stick up for us, normal people, and say they can't trample on you. I won't let them. Because otherwise, hell, we could be next. What's to say they won't come and throw us in jail and say nothing you can do?
Well, some people blame Trump.
I know.
In Matthew's last letters to his family, a suicide note he'd written just for her. I cared too deeply, Aunt Monnie. There was the war, and I chose to fight in it. Hats off to Pelosi and Schumer. Heck of a snare they had me in. Please don't think of me as a coward. I just couldn't handle these feelings, this fear and uncertainty any longer.
And that was Matt, an old soul. Here he is, this guy, he's 5 years younger than me. And he had this quality that my grandfather had. And it was just beautiful.
You miss him?
Oh, yeah.
What do you miss the most?
Just him being there.
It never goes away.
Yeah, I don't expect it will.
For Jerry Perna, in some ways, life stopped when Matthew died. But there was one moment as unexpected as it was comforting, when an honor guard from Ohio stood with them as they said goodbye to Matthew.
And that night of the viewing, there were two officers there, and they took turns. And my brother was very confused. We were all confused.
And in shock.
Yeah, we didn't understand why there was an honor guard there.
Just the two of them?
The two of them. The same officers came the next day, and they had an American flag, and they did a flag folding ceremony, and they handed the flag to my brother. And after the funeral, my brother said to them, "I'm so confused. I'm grateful that you came, but Matt wasn't in the service." And they said, Matt was more of a patriot than most every veteran we've ever done a funeral for.
Man,
That's what they said.
That's hard to watch, man. I'm going to be honest. And this is the first time that I'm seeing it with you guys. I actually waited on that for this reason. But it's important. It's so important, I think, for everybody to understand what these people have been going through. Not just from the Justice Department, but from other Americans, as these people are shunned from their towns. I think today maybe he's a little different. People have woken up to it, but he's not the only one that's taken his own life. All because he cared too much for his country. He cared too much about this country. And it cost him his life. Tough, man. We'll stay on top of this. You know we will. We've got plenty to get to on this front and much more. We've got a whole week of Over the Line podcast coming up next week. Thank y'all so much for watching this, for sharing this. Make sure you're liking and you're commenting and all that stuff. We've got some big, big things planned for the future that we are so very excited about. And you'll get to see those very, very soon. I'm out of here. Y'all have a fantastic weekend. And until next time, see you, cuz.